Chris Bumstead retired from competitive bodybuilding at 31 years old as the most dominant classic physique champion in the sport's history. He won 6 consecutive Mr. Olympia titles and never lost on the Olympia stage throughout his classic physique career. The Canadian champion retired at his peak, leaving speculation about whether he could have secured a 7th or 8th title. Before establishing himself as a legend, Bumstead studied the athletes who preceded him. He watched their videos, analyzed their poses, examined their training methods, and learned from their approaches. In recent interviews and social media posts, Bumstead identified his 6 favorite bodybuilders, the figures who shaped his approach to the sport, influencing his training decisions, competition strategy, and stage presentation. The list generated significant discussion in the bodybuilding community. Some selections were predictable choices that most competitors would make. Others were unexpected. One name contradicts Bumstead's aesthetic philosophy on stage, raising questions about its inclusion. Another expected name was absent from the list entirely, prompting speculation about the relationship between the two athletes. These 6 bodybuilders served as Bumstead's blueprint, teaching him what methods proved effective, what strategies failed, and what separates successful competitors from champions. Each contributed specific elements to Bumstead's development: work ethic, aesthetics, conditioning, mentality, posing, and public presence. When asked to name his favorite bodybuilder, Bumstead answered immediately, Ronnie Coleman. Coleman won 8 Mr. Olympia titles, tying Lee Haney's record with consecutive victories from 1998 to 2005. For Bumstead, Coleman's appeal extends beyond his competition record. It involves who Coleman was, what he represented in bodybuilding, and the mentality he brought to the sport. Coleman demonstrated the qualities the bodybuilding community values most. He trained consistently with the goal of outworking every other competitor. Bumstead has discussed his admiration for Coleman's straightforward approach to bodybuilding. Coleman avoided drama and competitive politics. He didn't create conflicts with other athletes for attention or engage in public criticism. He focused on training and demonstrated authentic passion for the physical demands of the sport. Coleman's training footage shows this clearly. His videos of squats and deadlifts with extraordinary weight have become reference points in fitness culture. 800-pound squats for repetitions, 800-pound deadlifts performed with apparent ease, accompanied by his signature phrases, "Yeah buddy, lightweight baby, ain't nothing but a peanut." While handling weight that posed genuine physical risk, Coleman appeared relaxed and engaged. This wasn't performance or content strategy. It reflected genuine commitment to the training process. Bumstead described Coleman's personality as happy-go-lucky, which accurately characterizes his demeanor. Coleman maintained positive energy throughout his career. He didn't complain about prize money, though bodybuilders of his era received modest compensation. He didn't participate in backstage politics or attempt to influence judging. He didn't discuss other competitors or generate controversy. Coleman trained intensively and allowed his physique to represent his work. Bumstead noted in interviews that athletes who maintain this focus naturally earn respect. Coleman's competitors respected his abilities and valued him personally. Jay Cutler, who defeated Coleman for the Mr. Olympia title in 2006, has stated he took no satisfaction in that victory. Coleman was dealing with injuries and wasn't at full capacity. Cutler acknowledged that defeating a compromised Coleman differed from competing against him at peak condition. This reflects the respect Coleman earned throughout his career. Competitors preferred to face him at his best or not compete against him at all. The respect between Coleman and Bumstead is reciprocal. When Coleman was asked about Bumstead's physique, he offered direct praise, calling it the best physique he has seen in his career. Not just in classic physique, but overall. The second name on Chris Bumstead's list is Shawn Ray. For anyone familiar with bodybuilding aesthetics, this choice makes complete sense. When Bumstead reviewed photos of Ray during podcast interviews, his assessment was unambiguous. He described Ray's physique as the GOAT in terms of pure aesthetics, the greatest of all time when it comes to what a bodybuilder should look like. It's a bold statement from someone who has studied every era of the sport, but Ray's physique at his peak supports that conclusion. Shawn Ray's body represented a complete combination of the qualities valued in physique development. His symmetry appeared geometrically precise. His conditioning revealed every striation and separation between muscle groups. His aesthetics created visual impact from multiple angles, and his size provided power and presence without becoming blocky or excessive. Every proportion was calibrated precisely. His shoulders were wide but not overpowering. His arms were developed but balanced. His legs were substantial but proportional to his upper body. His small waist created a dramatic V-taper that enhanced the impact of his entire structure. The flow from shoulders to waist to legs produced the silhouette that bodybuilding judges consider ideal. The muscle separation and definition Ray displayed on stage were exceptional for his era. During the 1990s, conditioning standards were high but below today's levels. Ray was ahead of his time in achieving deep conditioning while maintaining muscle fullness. He avoided the flat or depleted appearance common in heavily shredded physiques. Instead, he looked dense, hard, and full simultaneously. What truly distinguished Ray from his competitors? Something Bumstead has specifically noted was his ability to pose completely straight on without angles, adjustments, or strategic positioning. This is uncommon. Most bodybuilders, including Bumstead, pose strategically to minimize weaknesses or emphasize strengths. They angle their body to narrow the waist visually. They rotate to display greater muscle separation. They position their extremities to create favorable proportions. Ray required none of these techniques. He could stand flat-footed, square to the judges, with his body straight ahead and no compensatory angles, and his physique remained flawless from every direction. Front, back, side, three-quarter turn. The quality was consistent. The structure was inherent, refined through years of disciplined training. Bumstead has acknowledged that he uses strategic posing to create illusions of improved symmetry or to obscure minor imbalances. This is standard practice for nearly all bodybuilders. Ray was the exception. His combination of genetics and training produced a result that required no manipulation to achieve visual perfection. The third name on Chris Bumstead's list might surprise younger fans who didn't grow up studying the golden era of bodybuilding. For those unfamiliar with the name, Nubret was one of the most aesthetic bodybuilders of the 1970s, competing directly against Arnold Schwarzenegger, Franco Columbu, and the other legends from that period. He held his own against the biggest names in the sport with a physique that was notably different from everyone else on stage. While others pursued size and mass, Nubret built something that resembled a sculpture more than a conventional bodybuilder's frame. This is precisely why Bumstead was drawn to studying him. Chris Bumstead specifically mentioned one feature of Serge Nubret's physique that captivated him: the waist. Bumstead described it as looking pinched, and photographs of Nubret at his peak support that description. His midsection was remarkably small, creating an extreme taper that started from his wide shoulders and lats, narrowed to a minimal waist, and flowed back out to his developed legs. That V-taper was dramatic. It was the kind of structure that creates a visual contrast difficult to ignore, even when he stood next to competitors who outweighed him by 20 or 30 pounds. Serge Nubret earned the nickname the Black Panther, and it suited him. There was a sleek, powerful quality to his physique. He didn't have the sheer mass of some competitors, but he had notable muscle maturity, fullness, and shape. His muscles had a round, full appearance that created distinct lines and flow from one body part to the next. When Nubret hit a pose, the result was a complete package where everything worked together cohesively. That quality separates a good physique from a legendary one. Nubret's training philosophy was notably different from what most bodybuilders were doing during the golden era. While athletes like Arnold used heavy, low-rep compound movements to build mass and strength, Nubret took a different approach. He focused on extremely high-volume training with shorter rest periods, sets of 20, 30, even 40 reps on some exercises. He maintained constant tension on the muscle, emphasizing the pump and contraction rather than maximum weight. His workouts sometimes lasted 3 or 4 hours, repeatedly pumping blood into the muscles until they were fully engorged. Nubret's focus was on shape over sheer mass. He didn't train to be the biggest competitor on stage or to move the most weight. His entire approach centered on creating a physique with balance, flow, and proportion. Every training session, every exercise selection, every rep was performed with the goal of building shape and aesthetic presentation. That philosophy aligns with what classic physique is supposed to represent. Not who can pack on the most muscle mass, but who can create the most visually impressive package within specific limitations. For Chris Bumstead, studying Serge Nubret provided a blueprint for building that classic taper. Bumstead has always had favorable genetics for a small waist and wide shoulders, but seeing what Nubret accomplished with that same structural advantage showed him what was possible by maximizing those attributes. The way Nubret trained his lats for width, kept his waist tight and controlled, and built his shoulders and arms to enhance that V-taper, all influenced how Bumstead approached his own development. Elements of Nubret's aesthetic are visible in Bumstead's physique, particularly that dramatic upper body to waist ratio that makes Bumstead look impressive in front poses. Nubret also demonstrated something significant about longevity and sustainability in bodybuilding. Because he didn't rely on moving massive weights that damaged joints and connective tissue, he maintained an exceptional physique well into his later years. Even in his 50s and 60s, Nubret still had the shape and structure that made him notable. That's uncommon in bodybuilding, where most competitors are physically compromised by that age. His training philosophy, while unconventional, proved more sustainable for long-term health and physique maintenance. For someone like Bumstead, who has discussed openly the physical toll bodybuilding takes, seeing that alternative approaches could work without complete physical breakdown provides valuable context. The fourth name Chris Bumstead revealed is Kevin Levrone, the Maryland Muscle Machine, who represents one of bodybuilding's most compelling what-if stories. Levrone possessed exceptional genetics that allowed him to do something no other professional bodybuilder could replicate: take extended breaks from serious training and return to stage-ready condition in 6 to 8 weeks. While other competitors ground through 12 or 16-week prep cycles, counting calories and logging hours of cardio, Levrone could step away from training, live a relatively normal life, and then return to competition form in a fraction of the time. This level of response shouldn't be physiologically possible. Extended breaks typically result in significant muscle loss, metabolic changes, and conditioning deterioration that require months to reverse at the elite level. But Levrone's body responded to training and diet with unusual speed and efficiency. He took breaks to pursue music and business ventures, living outside the constant demands of competition prep. When a show approached, he would resume training, adjust his nutrition, and arrive in competitive condition. Other competitors worked through months of preparation while Levrone maintained a more flexible schedule, yet he still placed ahead of many of them. Levrone's competition record includes 23 professional wins, placing him among the most successful competitive bodybuilders in the sport's history. He won the Arnold Classic, Night of Champions, and numerous other major shows. However, the Mr. Olympia title eluded him throughout his career. Levrone placed second at the Olympia 4 times, in 1992 and 1995 to Dorian Yates, and in 2000 and 2002 to Ronnie Coleman, his final competitive year before his initial retirement. 4 runner-up finishes create a complicated legacy. Some view Levrone as a competitor who couldn't secure the sport's top title. Others consider him one of the greatest bodybuilders who competed during the dominant championship runs of Dorian Yates and Ronnie Coleman, 2 of the most successful champions in bodybuilding history. The 5th name on Chris Bumstead's list is the most controversial and unexpected. Dorian Yates, 6-time Mr. Olympia from 1992 to 1997. The man who fundamentally changed bodybuilding and shifted judging standards in a direction that many, including Bumstead himself, believe took the sport away from aesthetics and toward mass. Including Yates on a list of favorite bodybuilders seems contradictory for someone like Chris Bumstead. Yates represented everything that goes against the aesthetic philosophy that defines classic physique. He brought unprecedented muscle mass, density, and conditioning to the stage that made previous champions look small by comparison. His physique was thick, grainy, and powerful rather than flowing and aesthetic. Bumstead has named him as one of his biggest inspirations, and the reason reveals something about how he approached his own career. Dorian Yates didn't just win bodybuilding competitions, he dominated them so thoroughly that other competitors looked like they were in a different class. When Yates stepped on stage at the Olympia, the contest was over before it started. Everyone else was competing for second place. His conditioning was something the bodybuilding world had never seen before. Chris Bumstead respects Dorian Yates despite their physiques being polar opposites. Not for the aesthetic, but for everything else. Bumstead has discussed how much he learned from studying Yates' work ethic and mentality. Dorian approached bodybuilding like a professional athlete in a way that wasn't common during his era. He kept detailed training logs, tracked every workout, monitored his nutrition with scientific precision, and treated preparation like a serious business rather than a passion project. That level of professionalism and attention to detail set a new standard for how champions should approach the sport. Bumstead adopted many of those same principles, treating classic physique like a professional endeavor. When Chris Bumstead released his list of favorite bodybuilders, the bodybuilding community noticed an absence. Arnold Schwarzenegger was not included. The 7-time Mr. Olympia winner, often called the Austrian Oak, has been the face of bodybuilding for over 5 decades and helped bring the sport into the mainstream. The omission raised questions about the relationship between Bumstead and Schwarzenegger. Throughout his career, Chris Bumstead has been compared to Arnold Schwarzenegger. The physique similarities are clear. Both have wide shoulders, small waists, and the classic V-taper that defined golden era bodybuilding. Both competed at similar heights and weights, around 6'1" and 240 pounds on stage. Both dominated their respective eras and became the face of their divisions. The comparisons appeared in every interview, article, and social media post about Bumstead. Fans debated who would win in a head-to-head competition. Analysts compared their muscle groups and proportions side by side. Despite these constant comparisons, Chris Bumstead has only spoken to Arnold Schwarzenegger twice in his entire career. These were brief conversations, likely at industry events or competitions. There was no mentorship, no extended discussions about bodybuilding, and no personal relationship. For someone so frequently linked to Arnold in public perception, the lack of actual connection created a disconnect. Bumstead has addressed this directly in interviews. He respects what Arnold accomplished and understands his importance to bodybuilding, but there is no personal relationship. They are not friends. Arnold has not mentored him or advised him on his career. The comparisons exist because of physique similarities and competitive dominance, not because of any connection between them. This likely explains why Arnold did not make Bumstead's list of personal inspirations. Respecting someone's legacy is different from being personally inspired by them in a way that shapes your own journey. The bodybuilders on Bumstead's list represent specific influences on his career. Ronnie Coleman inspired him with work ethic and authenticity. Shawn Ray taught him about aesthetic perfection. Serge Nubret showed him the power of the classic taper. Kevin Levrone demonstrated how to balance size and flow. Dorian Yates proved that mental toughness and professionalism could overcome anything. Each name represents a lesson or influence that shaped how Bumstead trained, posed, thought about the sport, and approached competition. Arnold, despite his legendary status, apparently did not provide that same type of personal inspiration. The relationship becomes more complex when considering Bumstead's statements about competing against Schwarzenegger. In a hypothetical matchup judged by modern standards, Bumstead has stated he believes he would win. If both were judged by today's conditioning and detail standards, Chris Bumstead believes his physique would beat Arnold's. The statement sparked controversy. Old school fans called it disrespectful and arrogant. Bumstead's reasoning reflects how the sport has evolved. Conditioning standards in 2024 are not the same as conditioning standards in the 1970s. Modern competitors achieve levels of muscle separation, striations, dryness, and detail that did not exist in Arnold's era. If Arnold's physique from his peak years were placed next to Bumstead's physique from his Olympia wins and judged by current standards, Bumstead would likely win based on conditioning. This acknowledges that sports evolve and what wins today differs from what won 50 years ago. Arnold Schwarzenegger has been vocal about his concerns with how bodybuilding has evolved, particularly in the open division. He has suggested that competitors are getting too big and too extreme. He has said that classic physique should be considered the real Mr. Olympia because it represents what bodybuilding looked like during its golden era. If Schwarzenegger thinks classic physique is what the sport should be, and Bumstead dominated classic physique for 6 straight years, then Arnold is validating Bumstead's entire approach and aesthetic. After stating he could beat Arnold in a head-to-head competition, Bumstead clarified something. He still considers Arnold Schwarzenegger the greatest of all time, not because of his physique, but because of what he did for bodybuilding as a whole. Arnold took a niche sport and made it mainstream. He became a major action star, made hundreds of millions of dollars, and brought bodybuilding into the public consciousness. He proved that bodybuilding could be a stepping stone to something larger. That impact and legacy of expanding what was possible for bodybuilders after their competitive careers is something no amount of Olympia titles can replicate. Chris Bumstead has stated repeatedly that he will never replace Arnold's impact on bodybuilding, regardless of how many titles he wins or how good his physique looks. Arnold's influence extends beyond the sport. He is a cultural icon, a movie star, a former governor of California, and a successful businessman and investor. The Arnold Schwarzenegger brand is known by people who have never watched a bodybuilding competition and could not name another bodybuilder. That mainstream penetration and cultural relevance changed the sport. Every bodybuilder who came after Arnold benefited from the doors he opened and the legitimacy he brought to muscle building. The relationship between Bumstead and Arnold is complicated. There is respect for what Arnold accomplished and acknowledgement of his importance to bodybuilding history. There is confidence that modern conditioning standards would favor Bumstead's physique in a direct comparison. There is an understanding that legacy and impact matter as much as physical development. But there is not the personal connection or direct influence that would place Arnold on a list of favorite bodybuilders who specifically shaped how Bumstead approached his own career. 6 names, 6 competitors across 4 different decades of bodybuilding history, 6 different physiques, philosophies, and approaches to the sport. They all influenced Chris Bumstead's development from a young athlete in Ottawa to the most dominant classic physique champion in the division's history. The list reflects not just who made it, but what each person represents and what lessons they provided. It's a collection of influences that each contributed something specific to the champion he became.